Her organization is one of the few U.S. nonprofits that's still operating in Afghanistan. In Vietnam, she partnered with the State Department and with others to clear unexploded bombs, making it possible to plant more than 1.6 million black pepper trees. Her work shows the world the vital role agriculture must have in the resilient recovery from conflict and restoration of peace. For making her mission to turn mines to vines, I am so pleased to announce that the 2023 World Food Prize Laureate is Heidi Kuhn.
It's wonderful that members of her family are here. I thought how inspiring that someone who has just won one of the most significant awards any of us can give can't be here because what is she doing? She's actually doing her work in the field, helping to remove landmines in Azerbaijan. I think that in and of itself is an extraordinary tribute to Heidi and the book.
Heidi Kuhn is the visionary and founder of Roots of Peace, which she started in 1997 in her home in San Rafael, California. It grew from a seed of an idea to an international agent of change for food security in war-torn countries by raising money to remove landmines and restore the land for agriculture. Heidi was inspired by the late Princess Diana, a young mother with 2 small children. Heidi wanted to find a way to continue Diana's work after she died. And Heidi found a way. You'll see how in just a moment. She doesn't just raise money and awareness, she walks the walk. In spite of the fact that landmine removal is extremely dangerous work. I'm Cheryl Jennings, and I've been documenting Heidi's work for 20 years as a journalist and news anchor for ABC7 TV in San Francisco, and I've hosted online panels with her about landmine removal.
This is actually the first event that we hosted.
I recently visited Heidi at her home, where she took me on a short tour of her tiny basement office where she began her work. She survived cancer at the age of 30 and was chasing 4 young children around. She began her difficult fundraising efforts with just a landline phone and a fax machine to send and receive information. No smartphones, no computers, no staff, no money. A lot of kids in chaos, but also a lot of concern for children and families living near landmines. So you're in your office down the hall, that little tiny office, and the kids were here? All of your little ones? Heidi's little ones would run in and out of the playroom in the basement down the hall, while Heidi was on the phone trying to persuade government leaders, social clubs, farmers, and anyone who would listen to pay attention to the devastation of landmines and unexploded bombs left over in conflict-ravaged areas. I went to Afghanistan twice with Heidi and her husband Gary in 2005 and again in 2015 to document the changes created through Roots of Peace programs. They were often funded by the U.S. Agency for International Development. My husband, Rick Pettibone, joined us on missions to Israel and the West Bank and Vietnam in his volunteer role as our negotiator, consultant, and sometime photographer. We used our vacation time and paid our own way for many of these missions. That's how much we believe in Heidi's work and the work of Roots of Peace. The concept of Roots of Peace began at an event at Heidi's home with a simple toast. She raised a glass and said, "May the world go from mines to vines, landmines to grapevines." She couldn't have done it without the support of her extraordinary family, relatives, extended family, and friends who sat at the dining room table just like this and stuffed envelopes with literature and fundraising requests. Now her children are grown, and her grandchildren are learning about Roots of Peace. Heidi held fundraisers in the backyard of the family home in the beginning to save money because she couldn't afford to rent venues to host guests. She persuaded vintners in the Napa Valley of California to donate wine. She holds fundraising events in the backyard to this day to keep the cost down. Heidi Kuhn's relentless determination to create peace through agriculture has humble beginnings. Now, more than 25 years later, it's grown into a thriving global force to help feed a hungry world. Roots of Peace has touched the lives of people in Croatia, Cambodia, Afghanistan, Israel, the West Bank, Vietnam, Guatemala, Azerbaijan, and Ukraine. Congratulations to the World Food Prize 2023 laureate, Heidi Kuhn.
I have to applaud you. This is amazing, Heidi. It is such a wonderful honor for you and a powerful recognition for the work of Roots of Peace. How are you feeling about this?
Oh, Cheryl, I feel just so grateful. Only in America can you really, truly make your dreams come true. And I just feel so grateful to my family, to my husband, Gary, to my children, Brooks, Tucker, Kylie, and Christian, and now 7 grandchildren, for them to see an idea that was born in the heart of their mother and nurtured by a family in the basement of our home could grow to impact millions of people around the world. And I'm so grateful to the World Food Prize for elevating the platform of my voice as a mother, just a mother and now a grandmother, trying to leave the earth better for future generations to thrive.
We had a chance to see your beautiful backyard. And I know that that home is very special to you because it was a gift. Can you talk about that?
Oh, Cheryl, well, I was bestowed our beautiful home by my grandmother, Lucretia McNear Thomas, and it went back for the legacy not only of men, but the women in our family. And Captain John A. McNear came to settle in Marin County, the other side of the Golden Gate Bridge, other side of San Francisco in California, in the 1850s. And he purchased over 2,500 acres of land in what today is called San Rafael. They nurtured the land, they respected the people, they had values that were grounded. It wasn't quite the Marin County it is today, but those pioneer spirit that was instilled in my heart as a young girl is grown to fruition today. And I'm so grateful. My grandmother left me the home with a little simple message when she died at 98, do something for peace. And I hope my grandmother would be proud.
I think she would be. That's phenomenal. I want to move on to so many topics. It's hard to know where to start because you've been to so many countries and you've walked through so many minefields. And I was there with you on many of those walks through those minefields. I remember we both talked about when they ask you your blood type, it's a defining moment.
Absolutely.
But your very first minefield was Croatia. How did that come about?
Oh, Cheryl, well, when I made the original toast, May the World Go from Mines to Vines, it truly was a vision. It was an image of turning blood to wine, killing fields to vineyards, and swords to plowshares. And I immediately went up to the Napa Valley because it was the midst of the harvest shortly after the tragic death of Princess Diana. It was September 1997, and driving up there you could smell the beautiful harvest aroma in the air and see these beautiful grapes that were ready to be picked and nurtured. I went to Robert Mondavi and his lovely wife Margaret, and they were the first ones to host a reception for Roots of Peace, and we raised $30,000 in one day.
And he was one of the most prominent vintners in Napa Valley in California.
Napa Valley in the world. He actually was one of the vintners who put Napa Valley on the map in the 1970s. But through their generosity, they hosted this beautiful fundraiser. $30,000 was raised in one evening. It was matched by the U.S. Department of State, Office of Political Military Affairs, Weapons Removal and Abatement, and then further matched by the International Trust Fund in Slovenia. So when I had the opportunity to go to my first minefield, I selected Croatia because it was shortly after the Balkan War. And Croatia had 1.2 million landmines in this beautiful country along the Adriatic Sea that was once known for some of the best wines in the world. And as a cancer survivor, I feel that cancer is a landmine, and landmines are a cancer to the earth. So in my heart, in January 2000, I chose to take my first footsteps into a minefield, and again with a gratitude to my husband who took care of those 4 dear children and believed in the heart and vision of his wife.
My mind is spinning thinking about how you, as a mom in the basement with 4 kids, managed to corral all of those powerful resources to begin this process. And it doesn't stop there. I mean, then you met another prominent vintner along the way.
Yes, I did, Cheryl. And the generosity of the Napa and Sonoma vintners has just been extraordinary, as well as Eric Wente in Livermore. They joined me on this journey, this quest, where I just had pennies for peace in the basement of my home. But together, we raised the funds. We came back, and I was introduced to Mijenko Grgić. He was born in Croatia. And Cheryl, he just turned 100 years young this actual spring, and but he walked the minefields of his homeland with me. In May 2000, he went with me and my 13-year-old daughter, and he saw with tears in his eyes the beautiful memories of his childhood riddled with these insidious landmines. And so he came back to the Napa Valley, and on the 25th anniversary of Grgić Hill's estate, hosted a beautiful fundraiser. 60 vintners came out, and we were able to raise the funds to demine in Čestamale, Čestavelika, Bibinje, Baštica, Vukovar, Ilak. And today I can truly say, Cheryl, Croatia is one of the top tourist destinations in the world. And if we can lift up one country, think about the opportunity for the other 60 million landmines silently poised in 60 countries. It's daunting.
It is doable.
It is daunting and doable. Yes, ma'am.
So you have taken your work all over the globe. Let's go to Afghanistan right now. I was with you in Afghanistan in 2005 and 2015. I saw you with the beginning of a pilot project that was funded privately before you even got the attention of these powerful government forces for that next phase of your work. So talk about that.
Well, that was an extraordinary time, because I do remember flying back with my oldest son, Brooks, from Croatia with Jody Williams, who won the Nobel Peace Prize. And as we flew through New York just 2 days before the towers fell, I think the world was so devastated, of course, to see the consequences of war on our own soil on 9/11. But we were introduced to Afghanistan, and that's where I took the journey forward through the vintners, again, of the Napa Valley. Beautiful vintner who owns Silverado Vineyards introduced herself as Diane Miller, and she wanted to volunteer. She would come to my basement every week and, amidst the noise of children, handle the fax machine, filing in shoe boxes, and one day said, let's take a little break and go have lunch together. And at that luncheon at Il Davide's restaurant in San Rafael, she pulled out her checkbook and said, somebody's got to do this. And it was a $200,000 check, Cheryl. Can you imagine when you're in the basement of your home? And she said, you remind me of Dad. And I looked at the check and I said, Mrs. Miller, who was your father? And she very politely said, I am Diane Disney Miller. My father was Walt Disney. He had an idea or two, and it took him 330 no's to convince the world that a mouse with ears would bring joy and change the world. So it is with a deep Disney dream that we were able to take those funds and to the Shamali Plains located north of Kabul. And Cheryl, it was so hard because my husband went before I had ever gone to Afghanistan, along with my son Tucker Kuhn, who was only 18 years old at the time. And there were moments with Roots of Peace that I thought, what have I done? My family believes so much in this mission that I'm putting their lives at risk. But they, through the funding of Diane Disney Miller, we partnered with the United Nations Mine Action Service, Martin Barber, and then over to the Halo Trust. And the report we got back, every single penny that Roots of Peace gave to that project, we removed over 100,000 landmines, UXOs, and cluster munitions.
But it's not just about getting the mines out. It's about restoring the land for productive agriculture. And you had this unique program through Roots of Peace where you basically trained the trainers. That was one phase of it.
Well, and Cheryl, that's exactly right, because demining is only half the problem. Roots of Peace comes in strongly with the replanting, the regenerative agriculture, and that's where we realize the opportunity. It's all about jobs for people living in war-torn lands. So again, the same area that we demined in the Shamali Plains north of Kabul, we came back and trained the farmers how to grow the high-value crops. We introduced the trellis grapevines so that the farmers did not have to practice due to war, harvesting grapes on mounds, dragging them to market at
On
midday.
burlap sacks.
On burlap sacks. So we introduced the trellis, and you prune the vine, you double the yield, and the farmer gets more money. When that was introduced to Afghanistan, it was adopted by Afghan farmers throughout all 34 provinces. And then it got beyond grapes, Cheryl. It's in Kandahar and Helmand. It's the pomegranates and melons. North of, in Ghazni, Wardak, Logar, the apples, apricots, and almonds. Cherries in Badakhshan, beautiful saffron in Herat. And Afghanistan is a country 80% dependent upon agriculture for jobs. And it was once known as the Garden of Central Asia. Mm-hmm. And I feel the responsibility in the most heavily mined country in the world to restore that land, to bring forth the healing from the soil, from the soul, and to create that true sense of peace on earth, cultivating peace through agriculture.
When you were training the trainers, this is a partnership with a really important university in California. And they brought their expertise to bring the latest farming techniques, the most sophisticated techniques available. The reason the farmers were so backwards wasn't their fault. Many of the men were killed during the war. Mm-hmm. So you had to basically start with people who had no knowledge of how to farm.
Transfer of knowledge from grandfather to father to son was lost due to war. So they, the agricultural specialists that we brought in from the University of California at Davis near Sacramento, California, were some of the best agronomists in the world. And we also brought agronomists in from Washington State and Texas A&M, and would bring them to Afghanistan to train the trainer, to teach them top farming techniques. We introduced and built the first cold storage refrigeration. We taught the farmers how to pack in corrugated boxes, label it Afghan fresh fruit, and then with the air corridor shipping those beautiful fresh fruits to new markets in India and Delhi. It helped double and triple the income to poppies, quite frankly, Cheryl.
I remember being in the office of President Ashraf Ghani with you and Gary, and he said that Roots of Peace has changed our nation, which is a wonderful thing to hear from a top leader like that in a troubled country. So that must make you very proud. And those numbers are significant.
Well, the numbers are significant, and the contributions, Cheryl, are significant, because we couldn't have done this without the funding of USAID, USDA, DOD, European Union, Asian Development Bank, and private donations that came in, foundations like the Skoll Award for Social Entrepreneurship. And we were able to utilize those funds to really change the face of a nation. Now, a business fact that we did accomplish with Roots of Peace, in 2014, agricultural exports averaged for about a decade around 250 million. Through Roots of Peace, introducing the traders to the markets, we brought the traders to meet at Gulf Food, the largest food exhibition in the world. And the metrics went from 250 million to $1.4 billion. Afghanistan's an exporting machine, as President Ghani had told you.
He posed for the very first photograph to promote Roots of Peace grapes and pomegranates.
Do you remember that?
I remember seeing that because it was a picture that we shot together while we were on assignment there.
And Cheryl, you've been twice to Afghanistan. You're tremendous courage. You went first with me in 2005 with my daughter Kylie, when she was only 18 years old, 3 women walking through a minefield. And you helped start the Pennies for Peace campaign, building schools for girls so that they could be educated. And that peace through education, peace through agriculture is more important today than it ever has been.
I'm glad you talked about that because you have a program for women in Afghanistan that works today. And secondly, you have a change in regime in Afghanistan, which may or may not stop the women. So what is the status of that now? First, the status of it and how the women's programs are working.
Well, Roots of Peace has proudly worked in Afghanistan since 2003, and we stopped only for 1 day. And we believe our commitment to the Afghan people is essential, especially the women. Now, Cheryl, you went through one of the greatest challenges of my life, which was August 15th, 2021, when the Taliban took over Afghanistan. It was a defining moment for Roots of Peace because we had a choice. Were we going to pull out along with the majority of the NGOs and for certainly good reasons of security, or were we going to let that fruit rot in the field? Once again, it was September, decades later, but we felt a responsibility to the Afghan people. Roots of Peace serves no flag. We only serve the farmer on the ground, and it's taken tremendous courage and from our staff, not only our expats who are working there today, putting their lives on the line, but also for the 450 employees that Roots of Peace currently has today through the funding, longest running program with USAID. We are cultivating peace through agriculture.
And you're one of the only companies, nonprofits there, when you're allowed to continue these programs, including for women, but not in public.
Well, and the women, the way we're doing the workarounds there is again, respecting the laws within any country. That's not my battle, but we are doing the kitchen gardens. We're bringing, the beautiful herbs into the home so that the women who are right now forced to stay home have the dignity of jobs. We have dozens of women who are depending upon us for their salaries. And I am committed, as long as I am here at Roots of Peace, to stand beside those women. We have even little chicks that we bring into their homes. The chicks grow into chickens. They lay eggs. The children have protein. The husbands go out and sell the eggs in market. They come back to their wives and they're grateful to the women for helping nurture the finance that is essential to Afghanistan. Afghanistan has 97% of unemployment today, Cheryl, and it's a country, conversely, that has the ability to feed itself. 80% dependent upon agriculture for jobs. So the more we can turn those swords into plowshares, those guns into shovels, and put these Afghan men and women back to work in the fields, this is how we plant the roots of peace in Afghanistan and worldwide.
How critical is it to deal with the landmine crisis and to keep the funding going for Afghanistan?
It's tremendously challenging because of the the current regime, and it was a very difficult Christmas Eve for our family to have heard the night before that international NGOs who are working with women are banned. But I think the trust that Roots of Peace has developed over 20 years, they know. They call me Heidi Mama when I'm in Afghanistan, and they, as I was told by one of the prominent Afghans of a new regime, they don't look at me as a woman, they look at me as a mother who's feeding their children. So if that will help bring the food to those children who are in desperate need, Cheryl, right now. The amount of starvation due to climate change and lack of water. Roots of Peace, again, I cannot express the tremendous pride I have in our team for being over there and currently working so hard as we anticipate this harvest of hope as the World Food Prize is upon us.
You have work in other countries as well, and I want to get, before we run out of time, I want to get to Vietnam. I was
yes.
fortunate enough to go with you, so was my husband, Rick, to go with you to Vietnam with some donors, which was very fortunate to see the work that has already been implemented. So tell us about that, how you got into Vietnam, and also there's a connection to the Bay Area for an importer.
Oh, yes. Okay. Well, Vietnam, when I was in college at University of California at Berkeley during the 1970s, the Vietnam War defined our generation. It was a generation of peace and love. But there is no peace and love when the legacy of landmines and unexploded ordnance are left behind. In Vietnam today, in Quang Tri province, the former DMZ, on the 17th parallel, 80% of the land is still contaminated by the cluster munitions and explosive remnants of war. Roots of Peace has partnered proudly with MAG, the Mines Advisory Group, raised the funding. Again, it's very hard to do that because people think the war ended nearly 50 years ago. How could there be landmines? We never hear of it. Well, since the war ended, Cheryl, on April 30th, 1975, over 100,000 innocent footsteps of Vietnamese have been either maimed or killed by the explosive remnants of war left behind. So my son Tucker Kuhn went over there as country director, again, a mother's heart. In my decade, in the 70s, it was a draft card. And he was over there as a blue-eyed blonde drafting peace. And
he ran the programs there.
He ran the programs for several years. And the incredible forgiveness, I would say, of the Vietnamese government to embrace Roots of Peace. Again, we proved our trusted model for over a decade, but again, it's Roots of Peace comes in after the mines are out. We plant the sustainable agriculture. And Cheryl, pepper is a fruit, and some of the best pepper in the world comes from the former battlefields of the Vietnam War in Quang Tri, Dong Ha, Cam Lo, Khe San. People in the audience would know this. Very, very serious battles from the Vietnam War. But we are making the land hot with the black pepper and this beautiful late harvest and the black pepper. We're exporting it from Vietnam to Morton and Bassett Spice Company.
It's a great company.
And you've been there touring around with me and meeting Morton Gotthelf, who just passed away, but always forever in our hearts. And he was in the Vietnam War. He was a pilot helping bring the wounded back to the mainland. And when he heard what we were doing and how he, as a business, could apply corporate social responsibility to help us so that we can really manifest these corners around the world where we were literally turning those minefields into thriving farmland, rich agricultural bounty, and most of all, the money going back to the poorest of poor farmers in the field.
And their bounty, it changes them from subsistence farming to, I remember seeing them riding scooters and bicycles, and they could send their kids to school.
Yes.
And so much more.
Yeah, and Cheryl, that's so true. And you and I went out into the fields. We saw so many of these farmers without legs, without arms. You know, they had very rudimentary prosthesis that they would put on, but they were proud. They were proud that they were trained by Roots of Peace to grow the high-value crops, to provide the exports to the new markets. We worked in Binh Phuc and did the shade intercropping, and we had the cashew and the coffee. And so they got 2 agricultural harvests, and the productivity and being able to sell that to Cargill, one of our proud partners. Again, we've been so grateful for the many public-private partnerships we've been able to forge. And I'm just, again, so grateful to the World Food Prize because we've been doing this like a patchwork quilt, Cheryl, all over the world, walking through as many minefields as we can to raise the awareness and the funding. But peace is expensive. Peace is expensive.
And it's not something people want to talk about. They do not want to talk about landmines. No. I found that because you and I were on parallel paths when you were in the Balkans. I was also in the Balkans.
Yes, you
back
were.
in 1999 and 2001 in Kosovo.
I remember watching you on ABC7 in Kosovo walking through the minefields.
That's where I became aware. First time I became aware, even though I'm a military brat, nobody ever talked about that in my house. But when I saw that, I got it. And when I met you, I just was committed to use all my resources or whatever I could to help you. Yeah. And now I have to bring up something. You missed the announcement in Washington because you were busy in a minefield. So that is one of your two new projects. So take me to Azerbaijan.
Well, last month in Azerbaijan, I detonated 6 anti-tank mines, and just the sound of that blast, joyful for a moment, and then so bittersweet and sad when you realize that there's so many more millions of landmines just lurking beneath the soil, tempting an innocent footstep of a child, the boot of a farmer. Landmines know, they don't discriminate. They know no flag, they carry no color. And it was just, again, a very gut-wrenching moment. I also went to the bedside of a young man, Khazar, who was 34 years old, and on April 26, he had taken a wayward footstep in Karabakh, a beautiful vineyard area that produced some of the best wines. Karabakh means black garden, and that meant for the beautiful black table grapes, but it's a black garden where there's 1 million landmines that had been laid in the past decade. So I am deeply committed to turning, again, mines to vines, blood into wine, killing fields into vineyards, and across all cultures, the respect for the culture. Roots of Peace, again, Cheryl, you know that firsthand. We work in Afghanistan, we work in Vietnam, we respect the cultures. It may not be my choice into certain regimes, you know that quite seriously, but we're here to serve the farmer and not the flag. And whatever caused the wars, long after the guns have silenced, those seeds of hatred are planted in the soil and the soul. Because when anyone steps on a landmine, that mother who stood over my shoulder last month weeping over my shoulder of that precious child that she gave birth to, with a limb from a landmine so cruelly laid in the one earth, piercing the skin of Mother Earth, the one earth we share. So from my heart as a mother, I am deeply committed to the footsteps of my life to eradicate landmines from the face of this earth.
You're working on a project now, developing something with Ukraine.
Yes.
That's a little bit hot right now.
Oh, most definitely.
Yeah.
Most
so how is that
definitely.
going?
Well, Cheryl, that's, again, another hot spot in our world, and I've been deeply committed there since the war began in February, just a little over a year ago. And do you know that today, Ukraine, 30% of the land today is riddled and contaminated by landmines? Now, Ukraine was known as the breadbasket of Europe. But what are we doing to the face of the earth when we leave 30% of a country now mined? What are we going to do? What are we going to do to feed ourselves? And the 6 million fruit trees that we had planted in Afghanistan is carbon credits. So we need to look at the earth in a holistic way. We need to restore the value chain. We need a business model for peace. Demine, replant, and rebuild. Now, rather than turn on the television and throw our arms up, what could I do in Ukraine? We have partnered with Dmytro Kushnarek, the San Francisco Consul General. I've been introduced by Rotary to the Rotary Club of Ukraine and Rotary Club of Odessa, the Ukraine, a lovely woman, Tatiana. And she's introduced me to the farmers in Mykolaiv outside of Odessa. Now, that's another beautiful wine-growing region, but we're returning mines to vines there. We raised about $180,000 through Rotary. Wow. I know it's a drip in the ocean, drip, drip, drip ocean.
How much does it cost to take a landmine out?
$3 to create a landmine. It takes about $1,000 to remove it because you have to comb the area of land. And it's a very serious, very silent process, inch by inch. And so whoever wins or loses a war, the losers are the future generations and the land that is held hostage by these indiscriminate weapons of mass destruction in slow motion. So the earth is forgiving, Cheryl. Again, 60 million landmines, 60 countries. Humanity has the capability to eradicate this evil. And the earth forgives us with the beautiful fruits of the earth that may be restored. And I hope one day I may return with you to Ukraine and Afghanistan and visit these countries in another 25 years of our lives and leave a legacy for my children and my grandchildren and future generations, that there was a time in our world when we stopped and we paused and we looked beyond our borders and realized that landmines, whether the color of our hand, the politics in our mind, or the faith in our heart, a seed will grow today as it has for thousands of years.
You talk about your children a lot. They are inspired by you. Your son, Tucker, who was in Vietnam, is also working on another project we haven't gotten to yet, Guatemala.
Yes.
Why did you decide to do that?
Yes. Well, again, Cheryl, it's all about the farmer, isn't it? And it's about the soil and the soul. Now, we have a border crisis, a tremendously serious border crisis in the United States. And as an alternative to building higher walls, we're going to the root cause of outmigration. And in the northern triangle of Guatemala, Nicaragua, and El Salvador, these young men and women do not have jobs. The soil is rich, but because they haven't been trained properly to grow high-value crops, they haven't been introduced to the market. Roots of Peace is market-driven, so that when the farmers have the ability in Guatemala to grow some of the best high-quality specialty coffee, avocados, onions. I've been to Sacapula, 4 hours out of Antigua, and see these fields where you always think of onions making you cry. And these farmers had tears of joy that there was an American family that's there. And Tucker is working very, very hard in the Northern Triangle and the Western Highlands. The Western Highlands are 3 provinces in Guatemala. They're San Marcos, Huehuetenango, and Quiche. And I've traveled with my husband Gary and Tucker throughout, and Ryan, who is our photographer, my son-in-law. And it's peace is a family business, and I think getting to the root cause of outmigration in Guatemala, and again turning swords into plowshares, it's all about jobs, jobs, jobs. And the earth is fertile, and if we can give jobs to these farmers, I don't think we're going to have to invest in higher walls. We're going to have to invest in new markets. We need to get down to the business of peace, the economics of peace, and look at this as a business deal. The value chain, restoring the value chain, regenerative agriculture, respecting cultures, and changing the face of the earth.
You have done so much. Your family has done so much. They're inspired by you. What is your message for young people who are listening to you today about this, and where do you hope to take this message with the World Food Prize?
To reach out to the young people today, they've been through a war of their own. They have suffered one of the hardest times with COVID-19, but they see wars breaking out. But rather than a sense of apathy, there is a sense of opportunity to provide food for the world, to nourish the children and future generations. Peace through agriculture. I salute Norman Borlaug and his vision that social justice truly begins with feeding the world. So let us take that message of Norman Borlaug, who some say created the Nobel Peace Prize of Agriculture. Let's take his words. Let's bring an army of young people. It was called Peace Corps in my day. Let's call it the Roots of Peace Corps, and let's do this properly. Cheryl, I hope to walk many minefields with you until we put ourselves out of business, because I want to taste that juicy nectar of the fruit, bite into that apple, taste those grapes, and whether it's fermented or not due to various cultures, I look forward to planting the roots of peace on earth with you.
Congratulations. Thank you for joining us and getting to know more about the 2023 World Food Prize Laureate. I hope you are as inspired by Heidi Kuhn as I am. This interview is just one component of all the World Food Prize Foundation has planned for this year to elevate innovations and inspire actions to sustainably increase the quality, the quantity, and availability of nutritious food for all. Heidi will receive the World Food Prize at the magnificent Laureate Award ceremony at the Iowa State Capitol in Des Moines on October 26th. The ceremony is the grand finale of the Norman E. Borlaug International Dialogue, which gathers international leaders in food, agricultural innovation, along with farmers, policymakers, and business leaders to address the most pressing food security and nutrition issues facing us today. We hope you'll join us.